What's up? What's up? Am I live? Oh, sweet. Okay, we're live. I've got viewers. I think we've got this. Can y'all hear me okay? Somebody tell me in the chat. Am I hearable? Yep, perfect. Awesome. Thanks, Michael. I appreciate it. All right. So we're here for a Q&A about D6 System 2nd Edition. I'm excited to be here with everybody to answer your burning questions. You'll have to excuse the mess. We just finished moving last week across multiple states. So things are a little hectic here at Chez Gallant. And me leaving for Gen Con tomorrow, they're going to remain hectic for the foreseeable future. So you'll have to forgive me for my unshaven, roughshod appearance. All right, so this is a Q&A. The point of the Q&A is your Q's and my A's. So drop those questions in the chat right over there on the side. That side, mirrored images. And I will answer them as they pop up, and we will see what we can do. But a little bit about me. I'm Alan Bahr. I am the publisher and lead designer at Gallant Knight Games. I am the one spearheading D6 System 2nd Edition in all of its forms, formats, and glories. My off-center hat is bothering me. We're just going to take that off. Oh, no, we're not doing that. Look at that. Yeesh. No camera needs that. All right. Off-center hat it is. So I've been designing RPGs professionally for coming up on 10 years now. And we're, award-winning and best-selling, blah, 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 all the good words, right? So there we go. So we have our first question. Let's get to it. All right. So Alvarant asks, I only know D6 via Star Wars, the classic West End game Star Wars RPG. Will 2E have the same attributes? Yes and no. On our Kickstarter page, we talk a lot about modularity, and that does come down to attributes as well. There will be a core group of attributes. D6 Star Wars had, depending on the edition, 6 to 8. If I recall correctly, I'm off the top of my head, don't quote me on that. Some of them aren't appropriate, right? In a generic system, you don't need technical or mechanical quite as much in a fantasy or maybe Stone Age setting. And so we want to make sure we preserve that modularity. So there will be core attributes you are familiar with. There will be a few less than would have been the default in Star Wars per se. But there will also be modular attributes you can add in as a setting is appropriate, right? So running sci-fi, then you can absolutely add in a mech or a tech attribute. So hope that answers your question. Fast Trapper asks, will this be closer to Mini 6 or hold true to D6 version of West End games? This will not be like Mini 6. Mini 6 is produced by Anti-Paladin Games. They do a fantastic job at that. We're not going near that. This is a game that is licensed from the entire history of West End games. Mechanically and with the non-IP content. So we are producing something that is a vision for a unified new foundation for D6 going forward. So it will be the roll pools of dice, add them all together. It'll have the perks, the attributes, the multi-genre modularity kind of technical book you want, right? So we're not looking to do the stripped down Mini 6. They do a great job. Not going near them, right? This is entirely an update to that core D6 experience. Will it be streamlined in some places? Absolutely. Game design has changed. The way we talk about and communicate about games has changed over the years. So some of that's going to be different, right? But I think if you're familiar with, especially earlier D6, the stuff in Star Wars First Edition, maybe Ghostbusters, and then Open D6, you're going to see a lot of stuff that feels very familiar to you. Michael asks, how many settings did you come up with before you settled on the 3 we know about, and how hard was it to whittle them down? So we've unlocked 3 settings on the Kickstarter. We've unlocked one called Bronze Titans, which is a fantasy kaiju-related kind of Bronze Age thing where you are tribes with a totem kaiju. We've unlocked one called we've unlocked A Lonesome Ride to Hell, which is a fantasy horror, Elric by Michael Moorcock meets The Dark Tower by Stephen King, kind of this doomed wandering warrior in a horrific fantasy setting. And then we've mentioned one called No Star Too Far. We haven't really talked much about that one, but when we worked on the 3 settings, we always had this core idea that if we're going to do something, we need to do something that showcases how all these modular toolkits go together, right? Sure, we could throw a fantasy setting in there that feels like D&D or a known IP, right? But that's not the point. The point of a toolkit game is to take all those cool tools and build something new. And so all the settings we want to produce with this Kickstarter are going to have that vibe to them. They're going to have that goal, that element of, it's not just one thing. It's going to be a couple of things. We're gonna kitchen sink this in discrete portions, like well-crafted kitchen sinks, the kind you'd want to put in a nice house, right? And Michael says we have the 3 everyone knows about. There might be some more. There might not. Who knows? I know, actually. I'm just not going to tell you right now. So Todd asks, what are the major differences between Legacy and V12? Ooh, that's a big question, Todd. A lot of really subtle stuff, like cleaning up language where it was confusing or imprecise, or the same word got used in multiple genres for this different things, right? Some stuff like that. There's a lot of, we've changed the wild die a bit to be a little more of a narrative fail forward or backward mechanic. If you've played the Zorro role-playing game, you've seen how we changed the wild die there. That was really well received by those people who played it, and they gave us a lot of great feedback on that. So, that's something we're changing there. And the way hero points interact with that has adjusted a little bit. Like it all still feels very similar and familiar. We're not trying to make something that has the D6 name and isn't D6, right? We're just trying to streamline it, clean it up, sort of modernize the presentation, the communication, a few of the rougher edges to bring this really great thing that doesn't actually need that much to feel modern, right? Like this is more of reworking fresh coat of paint than trying to tear the house down to the foundations and rebuild. That's not to say we haven't torn the house down to the foundations and put all the pieces back as best we can. We did. That's part of trying to balance all these discrete modules, how to build this rule set that sort of goes back and forth between all these things. There's absolutely going to be some places where we had to take it all apart to sand off the rough edges and then jigsaw it back together. And that's just unavoidable in a project like this, right? But our goal has been, if you have played a previous version of D6, even with the changes, this should feel like D6 at your table to you. You might not agree with all the changes. I don't think anybody ever will. That's part of the hazards of a legacy like this, right? I'm aware that, who we are when we first encountered D6 and who we are today is going to be different. And, there's a trap of nostalgia, right? I'm not trying to do exactly what was done before because that's a fool's errand. What I'm trying to do is help us get to that feeling where we were before, even if the mechanics are a little bit different, to make it easier to play, easier to teach, easier to be modular, right? But always the core rule is it has to feel like D6. It has to play as close to D6 as we can get it while removing these rough points. I know that's kind of a roundabouty philosophical answer, Todd. Sorry about that. But there's just a lot. That's a really big question. I could go for hours about that. But the biggest thing, I think, is going to be the all-in-one book, the modularity, and the discrete portions where we call out what modules do or do not work together. If that helps. Like, big changes would be the default rules are static defenses rather than active, but we do have a modular, so you can put the active defenses back in if you want to do opposed rolls. But the default presentation is going to be those static defenses. That just plays faster. It's better as a default option because it's easier to add the complication than it is to remove the complexity, right? So when we made that decision, that's kind of the direction we were looking. And I hope that's a good example for you. Thanks for the kind words, Fast Trapper. It's appreciated. Roland asks, will the post-apocalyptic setting have mutations a la Gamma World and Mutant Crawl Classics? It will have mutations. I will not say a la those particular games, but absolutely will have mutations. I think we listed that on the module list when we previewed that. But it will be there. You will become a freaky, weird post-apocalyptic mutant if you want to. And there will be multiple ways that those can go up or down, right? So like if you want to do something like radiation causing mutations, we're going to have a module that lets you do that. If you want to do something like you can just get these, or science, whatever, there's going to be ways for you to explore that, right? Jordan asks, will there be meta-currency options like OpenD6 have with hate points? Yes, there will be hero points. Will there be different options in how to use it? Oh, yes and no. They will. The default rules will always work the same way for hero points. We're not going to change that. What we are going to change is using modules to open up different ways to spend those hero points that are outside the normal rules, right? So we don't want to just remove wholesale core portions of the game, because the game needs a backbone for it to function. If we don't have a good backbone, the skeleton falls apart. But what we want to do is change the ways we can connect those pieces of the skeleton together, right? So that's kind of what we're doing with that, right? So for example, some superpowers let you spend hero points as part of their superpower effect, right? And that elevates that superpower. And that's not a way you can normally spend hero points, but that's a discrete option included in that particular module. So, well, the core rules will be the same for the hero points, like in that core module. They will adjust as the other modules require, with usually new spend options or new ways to gain them or what have you. Michael asks, what was my favorite combo in playtest with the modular design to the system? Ooh, I'm not going to answer that because it might give something away that's coming up on the stretch goals. But there was a clear favorite, and it was a lot of fun. So, yeah, that's your answer, Michael. Sorry for the not answer there. Darth Dude asks, what about non-human character creation? Will there be traits and advantages similar to the options in OpenD6, like flight, dark vision, etc.? I suspected I would get this answer from you. Conveniently, Darth Dude uses the same profile picture around the internet, so I know who this is. I have not answered that question. I have deliberately hemmed and hawed from that question. And, this might be a good time to put a definitive stake in the ground with that question, I guess. But I'm not gonna. I'm just kidding. So with the non-human character creation, there will be templates for non-human characters, and there will be things like perks and talents, traits and advantages that can be used to modify character templates. This is a core book. We're kind of at a page count of 200. We cannot include every option. I think I've said this before, but I'll say it again. If I were to include every option under the sun, we'd be looking at a massive rule book, and that's not reasonable. But between the discrete modules, I think you will be able to do what you want to do. If not, obviously we have a plan for a product line that we intend to support. And template builder, toolbook, work kit kind of thing is on there and would absolutely include these pieces in it if they were not already in the core book. I know that's a disappointing answer to give because it was kind of a nothing burger answer, and I realize that. But the honest truth is that as a toolkit, one, we can't put everything in there to begin with, right? And two, with the non-human templates, the normal modifying template rules we're going to include will likely cover 90% of those scenarios. So any edge cases would either for a time have to be handled by the GM with any modules. Like if you want flight on an elf and that's not included, you might need to, use the superpowers module to get them flight. I mean, which the game will support. That's the whole point of the module, is that we shouldn't have to and don't have to. We don't have to reprint everything 3 different ways, right? We're trying to only put it in one place where it makes the most sense based on the priorities of each genre kit. So we will do our best. And like I said, there's no way I'll get everything in there that everybody wants. And there's no way everybody will be happy with everything we put in there. And I realize that. But my hope is, if you stick around, if you like what you see and you stick with us, you'll eventually see the thing you're wanting to see one way or another in some form. Right? Like that's kind of our goal here. Mischievous Troll asks, will I be bringing the Gallantverse to D6? The answer is no. The Gallantverse is a tiny D6 thing for tiny supers. That will not be showing up here. At least it is not planned. I'm very happy with tiny supers and how it plays, and I love the Gallantverse residing there. I have no desire to move it. We do have Gallantverse material coming though, so hey, look at that. All right. Chris McGuire asks, I'm really curious how the more freeform magic system will work as opposed to the different from the skill points magic system. Okay, so this is going to be a really high-level overview, and I want you to take that with a grain of salt because, again, high-level overview, there's always going to be nuance missed here. The skill points magic system treats spells like skills. Like, that's kind of the core element. Each spell is a discrete skill. You can learn each spell as a skill, and as you roll, you resolve the spell. The freeform magic system is a little different. So that's going to be a little bit like you pick the discrete element. It's like building a recipe. You're going to take the pieces of the recipe you want to make the spell, and you'll be able to cast it. Now, that's a little more time consuming in play. And so we're going to present some pre-built sort of spell recipes that you can just grab and go with if you want. But theoretically, the idea being you'll be able to take these modular pieces, create the spell effect you want, and then know how to cast it mechanically. That's a super high level overview. That's a really ambitious goal. I want you to understand that. Like, does it work? I think so. We had a lot of fun with it. We got pretty comfortable with it, but it is definitely one of the bigger module chunks in the book. Like, flat out, I will say that is, and it certainly is one of the most complex mechanically in the book. There's a reason we have the skill point magic system in there, because that's much easier to use, much easier to play with if you want to play. In that regard, there's a lot less overhead, right? So, Michael asks, can you give us a hint about what the hyper lethal combat looks like? Is hyper lethal? So basically, all the combat options you might want to see are going to kind of reside inside those core rules and those optional combat sections. The hyper lethal is going to be the things where, like, you can do more damage if you want granular wounds locations, hit locations, maybe more detailed armor reduction versus, the other armor options. Like, that's where all that, if you want to make like your really gritty or really high octane, punchy action combat kind of thing, that's where we're going to go with that, right? So that's kind of what you're looking for. That's where we're turning up the game from, like an Arnold Schwarzenegger Last Action Hero to John Wick, right? That's kind of what we're looking at with that. So, and inside that, there's going to be a lot of the there's going to be a lot of those details in there that will make that clearer, but that's where you're going to have a lot of those things there. So, Alvarin asks, I don't want you to reach all the stretch goals, but if you don't, will some of the setting books be released separately? Probably, absolutely. I mean, not probably, absolutely. It's not much of an answer. The goal will be yes, but it will depend on the line, the reception, and the direction it has to go, right? So historically, in terms of GKG sales, settings have always been a lesser seller than toolkits and rulebooks, right? Adventures and settings just sell less because GMs often make their own at home anyway. So while they might mine it for ideas, you're inherently reducing your population of sales. And that means those things often have to fall into a different priority bucket than other products in a product line. But one of the benefits of the Kickstarter, we can do it right here, right? So we're kind of working on that. So the hope is we get them all at the Kickstarter, boom, done. We can get them all out, right? If not, the goal will be to get them out. It'll just be a different timetable. Luigi 220 asks, I'm a bit late. Has he talked about the fail forward mechanic yet? So a little bit I touched on it. The fail forward revolves around the wild die now. So based on the wild die result, you can achieve a fail forward mechanic where you still fail, but there's like these levels of success inside that. And that's what we really use the wild die for now here. If you played Zorro, you kind of saw it in Zorro. It's a more, I don't want to say refined, but it's a more, the extra feedback we got from Zorro allowed us to tweak it, modify it, and refine it, right? So we're doing that. So that's kind of what we're looking at. But it is there, is tied to the wild die, and is basically going to be what the wild die shows, helps you know if you need to fail forward or not. And we're going to have a little flow chart in the book that helps you understand that. Will the different modules be at least somewhat compatible? Gunther the Matt asks. For instance, can we use horror elements as IPC? Absolutely. That is the whole point of this Kickstarter. That is like, if it is not the core design philosophy, it is in the top 3 design philosophy. Like, every module should fit together as best we can. Now, some will not be compatible. We will call those out, right? Like, I'm not going to recommend you combine both Magic style modules into one game. You can, but there are going to be sort of rough edges, balance differences between those 2 modules, right? So, but for the most part, you should absolutely be able to combine modules. Obviously, the more modules you have, the more like top heavy is going to get, the more unwieldy, the more rough edges you're going to find. Like that's just, the more you add, the harder it gets to maintain that smooth fitting, but definitely you can do what you want there. Hearing the feedback about the stretch goal list, we are looking into an option. We'll figure that out. Part of the reason we haven't done that is because we were going through stretch goals so fast. We weren't quite sure if we were going to hit some of these compilations we planned before we dove forward. So we didn't, because once we add something to a pledge in Kickstarter, we can't remove it. And so if we added everything to a pledge as like an all-in thing, you would also be able to remove it if things change. Like if we had every discrete module and then there's a unlock for a hardcover compilation, we can't remove those or combine them into a new thing, right? So we got to figure out what that looks like from a project management and on the standpoint from us on the back. And that was something that frankly caught us by surprise. We just weren't, despite all these Kickstarters, I haven't set it up quite this way with the modules and things, and that kind of just came out of nowhere on us. So part of the hurdle to that has been technology. So we'll get that sorted. Dark Dude asks, what about the opposite of lethal combat? Very competent characters like Conan mowing through waves of minions. Will there be cinematic rules for minion groups? Yes, there will be. Those will actually reside in the superhero modules in the section Nemesis, Sidekicks, and Minions, but they'll be easily ported to other things. And so will the Nemesis and Sidekicks. If you want to have companions, sworn enemies, all that will port from that superhero module to the other modules as well. Is there a comedy module in the core? If not, is one coming in the future? There's not a comedy module in the core. Having written comedy RPGs, a couple of them, they are the hardest to write, they are the hardest to get right, and they are the hardest to get buy-in from players on, right? They're exceptionally difficult. So, would I love to do one? Absolutely. Is it in the works right now? The answer is honestly just no. Sorry. Like I don't even know what I would write for rules in a comedy module, because what everybody thinks is funny is often very different. And the way everyone expresses humor is often very different. So that's a really difficult module to tackle. And I don't have a good way to do that for this particular project. So it's not on the radar. Can the superhero module cover Thor and Daredevil? Theoretically, yeah, it could. You can do that high powered or that street level. Yep. Should be able to. When we play tested it with mixed groups and with groups kind of existing at the same power level. And we felt like it worked good. A lot of those problems I think folks run into there are narrative more than mechanical in a lot of systems. At least that's been my experience. So to a degree that will just depend on the GM a bit, but absolutely mechanically it could handle that. Alvern asks, are there plans for actual plays and tutorial videos? Yeah, yes and no. So we are currently talking with some folks about how to produce tutorial videos. Probably not actual plays. We've done actual plays in the past. We've sponsored actual plays in the past. Unless you are doing D&D or have a big name attached to it, it is often very difficult to pull off an actual play in a way that is fiscally responsible for a small company. That's just the hard truth. And so, I mean, obviously, if people want to do actual plays, we'll support them. We'll provide materials that we can for them, graphics, whatever they need, sort of unofficially. But we won't probably be doing actual plays ourselves. But I would like to get some video tutorials on there. We are looking at increasing our video support for things like Tiny D6, D6 system, etc. Right? Darth Dude asks, were I able to purchase pants from Up Pledges? Discord joke, I had to run out and buy pants before Gen Con because we just moved and all I have are sweatshorts. And that was a little unprofessional for that. So I did buy pants. Yes, thank you. And they're nice pants. I'm very happy with them. So Fast Trapper asks, why did I decide to revive the D6 system? That is a big, complicated question. I gave an interview recently on the Full Metal RPG podcast where I talked about my history with Nocturnal Media, who owns Weston Games, my time as an employee there before Stuart Wick passed, and part of what I was doing with D6 there, and then my desire to find a continuation for that work. I wasn't designing anything new there, but I didn't want the work that could have been done and had been done and been thought about and talked about and planned to fall away, right? And so when I approached them about this, it was significantly a portion of nostalgia and love for what I think is a venerable and great gaming system. They're like especially early D6, like the earlier the better, and early BRP RuneQuest, like those mechanical chassis, like if you were to boil them down to their like core 4 to 6 page rules, they are so mechanically design elegant. And I'm on the young end of D6 fans, probably. Weston Games was mostly defunct by the time I was really actively playing RPGs. And so a lot of it was already legacy or older players teaching me D6. And there's a whole audience that will appreciate this that doesn't know about it or hasn't been exposed to it. And I just like the game. I just want to make stuff with this game. And I'm in a position where I have the skills, the know-how, the passion, the love for this, right, to do it. And I want to, and I can in that sense. And I'm really glad to see, from the backer response, there's a lot of people who feel the same way I do. And I'm really grateful for the trust they're putting in us and our vision for what we're doing here. So that's a great question. I don't want to get too sappy, but it definitely comes from a place of, could I make more or do more doing something with a rule set that I own wholly or that I am exclusive with or something? Absolutely, right? But that's not what this is about. This is about taking a great thing that has existed and that is starting to fall and fade, and to bring it back, right? Like I want to elevate that. And this is the best way for me to do it with my skill sets and my knowledge. Chris asks, he just says nice things. Chris, thanks for the nice things. Nice things back at you, Chris. You seem great. Glad you're along, and I'm really excited you're excited. Eric asks, question, will there be rules for vehicle chases and combat? If so, will you be using more abstract rules or more crunchy take that was used in the Star Wars editions later, for instance? I don't remember about chases. I feel like they're in there, but I'm drawing a blank. I've been talking a lot, and my brain just kind of crapped out when I'm here right there. Give me a second. There are abstract rules for chases, yes. They are not... the crunchy or complicated system is not there. If we do that, it'll be held back for a later book. Chases are, in my experience as both a publisher, designer, and a player, they are definitely more of an edge case mechanic where they don't come up as much as you might think. At least that's been my experience, and based on the feedback I've heard over the last decade as a designer, that seems to be true. So for our purposes, abstract is kind of good enough for the core book. It hits what we need to do, so it's functional. And when we're ready to do a more crunchy one, we'll definitely put that in something, but it probably won't be the core book. Skill specializations. We are We are not doing skill specializations in this core book, mostly because those are so setting specific that with the amount of modules and optional rules, it would add a really weird level of complexity that would be nigh impossible to manage from a writing, communication, and design perspective. If you're already adding like custom skills for every tiny D6 brain, for every module, if you're adding new attributes, right? Adding a third thing, which is skill specializations, which are going to be different for skills that might exist in multiple places. That's a lot of complication, because what might be a specialty for firearms in a fantasy game will be different in a horror module, will be different in a pulp module, will be different in a sci-fi module, right? And so that's a lot of weird skill specializations that are not useful in the broad context of modules, but only in a really narrow focus. And so right now, skill specializations are not part of the core book. We have done work around them. There is an intent to use them at some point, but it will be in a future project or product if we get there. Brett asks, congratulations on your Kickstarter, longtime fan. Will you be allowing third-party publishers to publish ventures? I don't have any control over that. As the FAQ on our Kickstarter says, Nocturnal Media and Weston Games hold the rights to this. We're producing under license. We have no legal right to sub-license it or permission. We've obviously informed them of the interest. They are aware of it, but whatever they do with that is their decision. We'll facilitate whatever they ask us to in that regard. I would absolutely, GKG on our own rule sets, we've released many into the Creative Commons. We have community content programs. We allow other publishers to do licenses, right? So obviously it's a thing I'm familiar with, I'm a fan of, and if asked to support it, I absolutely will. But that is not my decision to make. That is not my decision to put, it's not my place to put pressure on my licensor for that, and I'm not going to, right? I will say when we pitched our initial vision for this, there was conversation about that. But in the end, what they want to do with that is up to them, and that's their decision. And I support them wholeheartedly either way on that, because it's Weston Games. They're allowed to do what they want with their stuff, right? When we own the toys, we can do what we want. Michael asks, what do I think really sets D6 2E apart from other tabletop RPGs out there? Is there one or two things about it that make it shine? D6 2E, and this is an extension I think true of a majority of the D6 products, is a game system where when you strip it down to the basics, I said earlier, it's really elegant, right? There's zippy, like really cinematic, fast-paced, action-y play that is very satisfying because the tactile physical response is rolling lots of dice, and that feels good. There's something satisfying about the tactile way you can play D6 that I think a lot of RPGs don't give you, right? That those piles of dice, and the counterpoint to piles of dice being they can be difficult to add up quickly and result, right? Like the more dice you roll, the more math you have to do, and that slows things down. So there's this catch, right? And so I think what sets D6 apart is the inherent elegance in the system, as well as how modular it is up and down. Like when you look at the names that were involved in the genesis of D6, it's no accident that the system holds up as well, 30 to 40 years later as it does, right? Like some of the people who worked in this were veritable RPG design geniuses. Greg Stafford was involved, right? Greg Stafford, in my estimation, the greatest game designer of all time, right? Like there's a legacy here of intelligent, thoughtful, careful design. And I think that's what helps D6 stand the test of time in general. And my hope is that by helping remove some of the, the corrosion, the gunk, the dust that's built up over years of dormancy, not like people aren't using it or playing it, right? But like years of this sort of dropping down the rungs in the RPG hierarchy, we can show what's so zippy and interesting and fun and dynamic about this game. Honestly, it's just a great game. Like, no matter what way you slice it, D6 games are great. My personal favorite is the Metabarons version. Just probably because I'm a giant Metabarons nerd and fan. But, Michael also asks, what is the most challenging thing to design for so far in D6-2e? Honestly, it's been keeping the language consistent and the modules consistent in how we present, talk about, and approach, because it can be easy to veer off or to forget a term, right? So there's a lot of, it's very precise in a way that a lot of Gallant products and other products I've worked on at other companies don't have to be, because we're aiming for a different goal in the modularity and the interconnectivity of the different pieces, right? And so that really helps us kind of achieve our goal, but it's also definitely the hardest bit to do, for sure. Oliver, I might swing by. And I'm not saying adding numbers isn't fun. I'm just saying that, the more dice you roll, the more numbers you have to add. And that can definitely slow things down if you're trying to play quickly, right? So there's this catch-22 there, where there's a feedback loop. Jordan asks, are there different options on how to track damage, wounds versus hit points, etc.? Yes, we'll have the standard default, no hit points, but you roll opposed resistance roll kind of thing. But then we're going to have some other options in there too, as part of what the hyper-lethal combat includes, as well as some other places that will let you do things like that. So absolutely, we'll have different styles of things. Now, all those will not be compatible, right? So you'll have to pick the one you want to use, but they will be there. Darth Dude asks about the freeform magic system. Will it be similar to Open D6 Fantasy, where the TN was based on spell parameters? That's a good touch point. That's definitely the skeleton we were working from when we started with that particular module. Is it 100% like that? No, probably not. We definitely made some tweaks, adjustments, tried to smooth out some of the really rough spots there. But there's definitely that. I mean, that certainly informed the entire module from the start. So I think you'll be able to see the lineage. I don't know if I would say it's similar, right? But there's definitely a through line there that you can see. Alvarin asks, one thing I loved about Star Wars D6 was the ability to improve core attributes. Will that be possible? We have multiple experience systems that work different ways. That does include, one of them does include improving core attributes. I think more than one do. So you should absolutely be able to. Like you're going to have a lot of options that make sort of the game you want out of this here. But you're going to be able to kind of just run how you want with that. Yeah, Magic is hard in any RPG. There's no way to do it right, as evidenced by a giant discussion in Tiny D6, our minimums game about Magic in our Discord today. Like it's just hard to do Magic because it's not real. Will it be GM tips and tables available in the core book? Oh, yes, there will. They'll mostly take the advice. They'll take the form of advice about combining modules or how to interconnect these pieces of D6. But they will be there. There will be advice about where to start. Like we'll definitely be recommending, if you are doing something for the first time, run your first game using just the core module before you add other stuff in, right? Get comfortable with the basics before you expand and throw all the stuff into the gumbo pot, because that gets a lot harder to handle on the fly if you don't know what you're doing, right? So we're going to have some guidelines. We're going to have some suggestions, some things like that. And the various adventures and settings we're going to release also will have that. Like I showed with the module worksheet, one of the things we're going to do with every product is include that module worksheet at the front, so GMs or people playing it know what modules we included when we worked on it. So that'll be there. Alvarant, quick start guide for the players. If you don't mean the quick start, like the quick start adventure PDF thing we're releasing, then no, there won't be. The core book will be the core book. That'll be for players and GMs. If you're looking for something, like just a player reference book, that's not something we're currently have in the product pipeline. Darth Dude, so as spells are skills and the freeform system in mind, they could be reskinned as power. Yeah, if you wanted, yep, absolutely. That would be, you could build templates by giving those magic. See, you're catching on to where we're going with this now. Yep. So that would easily allow you to customize templates by adding some default skills. Yeah, so I didn't want to call that one out specifically because there's a lot of reasons why I didn't. Partially because until everything's done and finalized, modules can change. I don't want to put the wrong expectation out there, right? But as written, if you wanted to build your own templates, which we do include guidelines for building your own templates, you could use Magicka skills to add functionally what are powers to each thing, and you could do this with superpowers too. Like that would easily work both ways. If you want to, let's say there's a superpower for flight, and you wanted to pull flight onto a character as an option, you could do that, right? So that's all there. Well, we've gone 40 minutes. What other questions do folks have? Fire them at me. I'm happy to answer. Also happy to answer other questions. If they come up, it will tackle them. Fast Trapper asks, was I expecting so much support and excitement from the community as you've seen? That's yes and no. I definitely am both surprised and grateful, certainly grateful for the amount of support and excitement we've seen. And honestly, one of the things that most worried me about this project going live is how there's a lot of expectations around how old D6 did work, etc. Right? And we're gonna have to change some of those things. Like, there's no way to reconcile 25 or more years of game design theory and history across multiple game lines that have different needs into something cohesive. Some things are going to get left behind. Some things are going to have to be changed. Like, you got, in this case, we're making an omelet, right? We're going to break some eggs. And anytime you are breaking a fandom's eggs, to a degree, you are playing with fire, right? And so I think my concern was less, what did I think we would get community support? Absolutely. Did I think we would fund and be able to make our game? Absolutely. Did I think I have been very thrilled and excited that so many people share our vision and what our goals are for this. Because I will be honest, I had expected a lot more pushback and sort of like, I don't want to say attacks, right? But like sort of pushback on what we're trying to do. And, the fact that we were able to communicate our vision and people understand it and they're being bought into it, that really means a lot to me, because I feel very strongly about the way we're approaching this as being good for the community, good for the game, good for everything we're trying to do here. So, and the fact that that's shared really means the world to me, because I care very deeply that this project goes well, but meets as best we can the expectations that I think and feel are going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to meet. J Luigi 220 asks, are the advantages and disadvantages similar to old D6? Yes, they're going to vibe similarly for you. We've changed some ways you can acquire them a bit to ease some of the math during character creation in a few ways, but yeah, they're going to feel like that. Stan asks, just showing to bring discussion about the wild eye mechanic will work. Stan, yes, we pointed people to Zorro for sort of a example of how that'll work. But the wild eye impacts both hero points as well as a fail forward and a fail back mechanic and critical successes. So we'll be posting a preview on the Kickstarter later about the wild eye and how it works. But if you played Zorro with what's powered by an early version of D6 2, it's going to feel very familiar to you. But it still is the one die out, different color, larger, what have you. Jordan Dennis says, what's your favorite rules that you playtested in your smaller games that may influence how D6 2E is involved? The post-apocalyptic module collection has rules for settlements and sort of enclaves and things like that. And the macro gaming element of RPGs is something I've always loved and been fascinated with, be it the Manors and Pendragon, be it enclaves and tiny wastelands, be it managing communities and some of my unreleased works, what have you. There's a lot there, and I love when characters can influence something that's on a character sheet they don't own, like a community. I think that's fantastic. I think it's the best thing in the world. And so certainly a series of these macro elements in gaming has definitely led me to improve that. I think it's going to be slick. I think it's going to be freeform. I think it's going to go well. I think it's going to be great, right? So that's probably the best example. There's some things from my game Syma, Syma, which is Incense and Iron, dark gothic fantasy, rules lightning, that have definitely influenced some of what I've done here. But yeah, certainly that. Michael, that is a hard question to answer. That would depend on which module you want to grab, I think. And ask me after we unlock let's see where we are with the stretch goals before I can answer that fully. But there will be a way to do that one way or another. Directed asks about the deluxe book. Will the 3 covers be inside the book? The answer is yes, they will. Either as art in the actual book and like in layout and production, or as like sort of variant covers at the front or back. Either way, you will see all the covers, including all the cool module covers. We're gonna put it all in there. All the art. Mass combat rule option. Mass combat. I am torn on that one. So we have a mass combat option. It is not currently in the book. I have written it. We have play tested it. I am not in love with it to the point where I'm committed to putting it in the book, which is why I haven't mentioned it. Because we have some time before this comes out. We're gonna have to double check all this new stuff we're writing too. So there's still time to decide on what to do with it. And it's possible it might fit somewhere else. Like the A Lonesome Ride to Hell campaign setting can easily justify mass combat. Like my brief includes mention of mass combat. So it's entirely possible the mass combat rules might show up in there as a discrete module for that campaign setting that you could port, but that we intend mostly to be used there. Or they could be in a core rule book or something like that. But right now, I'm not happy with them. And I'm not willing to add a mechanic and release something that I feel unhappy with, or that doesn't play the way I want with the other modules, because that would undermine the whole endeavor from the ground up. So hope that answers that. Starlaw asked me, does the horror module cover kids on bike subgenre? Not explicitly, but you could do that. We'll have mechanics and templates and modules that allow you to do younger, older, experienced, less experienced, whatever characters, right? You'll be able to turn that dial. And so as part of that, combining the horror module, could you absolutely run something that's like a kids on bike or a Stranger Things, Stranger Stuff style thing? Absolutely. No problem. Could totally tackle that. Fast Trapper, I absolutely would love that. I would love a way, love to be able to run one D6 related Kickstarter every year, that includes sort of an annual or these other elements that we can do something with, right? Be it more settings, splat books like a template workbook or a magic source book or an upgraded Starship building source. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of things you can do with these dials in here, right? And so I don't want to commit us to anything, and I'm not. So let me be clear on that. I'm not committing us to anything outside of what's on the Kickstarter page, because in the end, I've got to finish what's in front of us before I can even commit to another course. But we definitely have had these conversations. We have definitely planned these conversations. And we have definitely considered where this can go and what we want to do with it and the best way to approach it. And part of that will depend on community feedback, right? If folks tell us they want that kind of stuff, we'll tackle that, and that becomes the priority. So, Alvaro asks, what kind of sci-fi genres do you like? Space opera, traveler, etc. I tend to... So my favorite sci-fi TV show is Red Dwarf, which is the British sitcom. It's very tongue-in-cheek. It's very sort of silly, back to comedy, right? I adore it. So that sort of Boys from the Dwarf. That sort of tongue-in-cheek. I guess you'd call it space opera, right? I'm not really sure that's accurate, but it's probably as good as you're going to get. So that's my jam, right? So when I run sci-fi, it always seems to end up there. I also love giant generation ships. Like the bigger the starship, the better. So big fan of that, right? So that's the question there. Michael asks, you've gained a ton of incredible art writing talents. Has it been a fun process collaborating with everybody? it's always a fun process. All the core work, the words, blah, 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 blah. All the people I've been able to work with, all my coworkers and colleagues and friends, like, it's just a dream come true every time I make a project with these folks, because there is a creative energy that we get to share. And I just adore that. Like, it's the thing that keeps me going when things get, when they suck, right? Like, it's kind of where we go. So, absolutely. Every one of the setting modules has a co-author who's alongside me to help get this moving and keep things going, right? So I don't become a bottleneck. So there's this real collaborative, fun jive here that I get to play with, and I just love that, right? And being able to pay my friends, most of these people are coworkers who have since become friends because we enjoy working together so much. Being able to work with them and watch them get paid and have joy doing what they get to do, that's one of the best parts of my job as a publisher, right? Is seeing all these creatives create and be able to, and I love that, right? That's a big priority for me. So will there be Starship creation rules, expanded Starship combat down the line? That is certainly something that is high on my list if the project line is in a place where it can support that. Absolutely. I'm taking this off because it is hot and you're gonna have to deal with the glare. I can do this. Yes, that's absolutely on our list. It will not be in the core book. I'll tell you that right now. We will have Starships. There will be rules for using Starships. We'll present limited customization options, but a full Starship customization toolkit, there's no way that's going to be in this core book. That'd be a whole book in and of itself, right? So, but there will be a limited use sort of module for that, right, as part of this. So you should be able to get what you want. And keep in mind, again, there's this great D6 lineage. With some tweaking, you can probably grab a lot of stuff from previous D6 and rework it, maybe make some adjustments and bring it in, right? Like, that's one of the benefits of a project like this. So, Alvin has the Red Dwarf RPG books. Yep. So, will there be information on planet creation like Star Wars? Jordan, not in the core book. That's a little outside the scope of what we want to do. That's a very specific thing. That is something that is on our radar. And like I've said a couple of times, like some of these more niche or specific or focused elements, they are ripe for companion books, additional products, ongoing annual compilations down the line, right? And part of the hard part about a modular project like this is stuff has to get cut. There is no way I can include everything everybody would ever want, right? And so to that end, sometimes we have to look at, one, how many people are going to use it, two, how easy is it, how much space does it take up, and how hard would it be to convert previous versions, right? And there's a lot of factors that go into what we decided to include. But yeah, that's not going to be one that's in here in the sense like you're thinking. Paul, there will be no conversion tables. That is a legal quagmire. We're not going near it. If you want to do that, you'll have to do the work on your own. I'm sorry, but there's just no way to make that happen. Eric, it was my favorite D6 setting was Metabarons, the Jordowski comic. There was a RPG in the past for the Metabarons role-playing game. And it was fantastic. But I'm a giant nerd for those. I love those comics. So Metabarons, yeah. And I admit that's probably my favorite because I love the comics. Like, mechanically, it is D6 and it's great, obviously, and I love it. But the setting is really what draws me to that particular iteration of D6. Lee, hard suits like the one in Bubblegum Crisis. Ooh, that's real specific. Oh, we do include power armor and rules for power suits, but I know we don't have rules for creating them because that would be something we would include in a later supplement, because that's pretty niche. But there are rules for power armor, and you could probably pretty easily extrapolate scale, especially using the superpower system. You could probably create something that really suited your needs pretty well, I think. Though, again, obviously, like I've said ad nauseum, right? 200 pages is the limit for the core book, so not everything is going to make it. We're not going to be able to do everything right away, but if you want something that we haven't done, obviously we're listening. We're making a list every time anybody asks these questions. After we're done here, I'm going to listen to this again. I'm going to make a list of all the things people said they wanted to see that I one, either can legally do, or two, think are reasonable and would have the sort of that return on effort that enough people are going to want to do them, and then we'll tackle them. There's a lot of bestiaries. You're going to see a mix of classic and new. The fantasy is going to have dragons. It's going to have things like that. So obviously you'll see some of those classics. Hopefully we have some new stuff. I like making weird monsters. I'm hopeful to get a couple in there. But 4 bestiaries means we're spreading the monsters out between 4 sections too as well. But again, because of the modules, should be able to pull them between others pretty easy. Hero points as metacurrency are supposed to be spent freely and generated easily. How was your experience regarding this whole playtesting? Great. We had no trouble. The wild die helps generate them and helps tell you how to spend them if you want, as well as the various powers and modules. So we definitely, hero points were going great. We loved them. We used them. They were flying across the table. Obviously, one of my design perspectives, and I talked about this back when we did Zorro in 2019. But one of my goals with Zorro is, as a GM, I'm always forgetting metacurrencies. I'm always failing to hand them out. I'm always failing to remember to reward players with them. They are a thing that I forget about all the time. And I wanted the generation of them and the spending of them to be as baked into the game mechanics as I could, so we could justify that free flow of them, right? And so we definitely worked hard at that. Bestiaries. We're back to that. Oh, nope, we said that thing already. Superhero will be the perfect one for anime. I mean, I think so. Most anime is pretty superhero-y. But, your mileage may vary. I would imagine a lot of it will be easy to reskin one way or another between the modules. So, will the magic have a ritual version, such as the Buffy Open D6, where you have to find the spell, the components, and do it kind of thing? The horror module has dark and ritual magic, as we called it. It's not going to be just like that. It's going to have some differences, but there is sort of a longer form. You can't quite dash off a quick spell, but you have to actually do the thing version of that magic. Absolutely. Yep. We've got that. Folks, we've only got about 3 to 2 minutes left. Hit me with your big questions. Go quick. Keep in mind, again, I'm shooting off the top of my head here, so please understand that if I say something and it is different when the game comes out, that is because either things changed during final playtesting, editing, license approvals, etc. Right? So, all of this is, sort of subject to final approvals and release. Keep that in mind. Gunther, that's not a bad idea. I like it. We toyed with that. It made when we were toying with that, it did make referencing kind of a pain in the butt. We haven't committed one way or another. We'll see what we do when we do the final layout. Michael, active responsive combat, 2 options for combat or an alt version of normal combat. So, Michael, traditional combat is I roll the dice. If I beat the TN, I hit you, right? Then we do damage. That is the static combat. That is sort of your classic armor class. Zorro did that with the TNs for defense, right? World of Darkness does that with the static defenses. That's kind of what we're looking at, right? That's going to be the default because it's less rolls. It's more sort of fluid, easy to teach. Active and responsive is going to be opposed rolls, and there will be modules and rules inside that allow for, if you miss by X much, we'll do another attack, things like that. So there's going to be this sort of give and flow. It's a lot more complicated. You got to be a little more on your toes mechanically with it, but there's going to be this give and push and pull there. Darth Dude, yes, hero points can be granted by the GM for whatever they want. We just went out of our way to try to bake them into the mechanics because I wanted them to be as easy to remember as possible by having the game tell you when to do it so you don't forget. Will the scale be in metric? Oh, I don't remember what we did. I don't think so. I don't normally write in metric. Sorry. I apologize for that. We'll take a look. I might not change it though. Got to be honest. I'm an American, and we don't use the reasonable metric system like we should. So, thanks for the Q&A. Thanks for the good wishes at Gen Con. Will there be a POD option for any supplements from the Kickstarter? That is the intent. We always try to put our stuff in POD for people because it makes it more accessible for folks who are not in the US. We realize shipping costs are awful, and POD is a good way to mitigate that. So we will do our best, and I would anticipate anything that we can print in POD, we will eventually, though obviously POD has its own restrictions and limitations on what we can and can't do, including sizes, formats, bindings, etc. Right? I see the GM screen comment. I have talked about why I don't want to do those. Is because they rack up the shipping costs because they move it from books into books and other stuff, which can double or triple the shipping costs if you're in the US and more outside of it. Right? That's one reason we don't have dice either, is they move it away from the cheaper book, no customs, no VAT, no whatever on books options that are really the most affordable way to ship. But we hear it. We're looking at the digital options for a GM screen. We'll see how we go from there. I will try to do another QA before this ends, maybe one of the last 48 hours or so. I am at conventions for the next 2 weeks. So I will be working remote. So we will see from there, right? But I will try to do another one. I'm glad this hyped people up. I'm glad you had fun. Again, I'm going to close. I want to remind everybody, everything I've talked about here is tentative with final publication, release, editing, all that, right? We're going to do our best. Obviously, I'm outlining a vision. We've written a good chunk of this. We've done our best. Like the Kickstarter said, we've written most of the core stuff already. There's still editing. There's still final revisions. There's still fitting all the pieces together with all the stretch goals, the modules, the things we've unlocked, right? So are these things subject to change? Absolutely. Are we going to do our best to deliver what I'm talking about here? Again, absolutely. I love this game. I love the D6 system. I love this community. You guys have been wonderful. You folks are fantastic. I appreciate the support. But, you know, remember the Gallon Night, I say this all the time, our core rules at Gallon Night are the people in the community come first. Games are about community and having fun, and they're about that. So the minute you're sacrificing that for something else, we've missed the mark, right? So we want you to we want you to remember that, right? We're all people, and we want to be treated like it. So one more question. Any idea on how long the campaign ends and the PDF will be available? Currently, the deadlines on the Kickstarter campaign are the best measure for that. Will we slip? Well, we've unlocked a lot of stuff. That makes it harder, but we're going to do our best to be on time with those digital goodies. So you're looking at like February, March for delivery of the PDFs, I think. And once the backers have them and they're approved, we'll be going live to sell them. So anybody who doesn't get them, we'll be able to get them at that point. But I hope that helps. Folks, you've been fantastic. Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching the QA. It's going to go down. We're going to do some tweaks, probably do a little bit of editing, clean it up because, you know, stuff, right? And then we'll drop it and we'll chat. All right. Bye, everyone.